My name is Jamie Thomason. I'm a simulation specialist and a learning partner here at Mursion, but we are a virtual reality company for emotional intelligence. We use simulations to power experiential learning for essential workplace skills like leadership communication, empathy, any of those sticky conversations, whether it's motivating an underperforming team, de-escalating interoffice conflict, adapting to different work styles, or simply making certain that you're providing an inclusive workspace, that everyone's voice is heard. Any of those hard conversations need practice. And that's what Mursion exists to do, is to help make that practice perfect. So you can find us in L&D, diversity, equity, and inclusion, service, sales, ed services, healthcare, defense. I'm happy to answer questions along those lines a little later on if you have any. In a nutshell, we are the only place that combines a live human in the loop, that's what that simulation specialist is, in conjunction with artificial intelligence. That human in the loop and the AI drives avatars, which are customized in customized environments to deliver those customized scenarios so that your learners can gain the confidence and the competence to go out and have those difficult conversations. And again, I'll be answering any questions later if you would like. But right now, we're going to go ahead and turn things over to Christopher D. Connors. I'm not going to read you his whole bio here, but you can imagine why I'm excited to have him here. He is the best-selling author of Emotional Intelligence for the Modern Leader. Christopher is an executive coach and keynote speaker who helps to increase emotional intelligence and prioritize results and build thriving organizations. He works with executive leaders of Fortune 1000 companies, sports organizations, schools, and universities. He's well-versed. We are extremely pleased to have him on board as our guest, as our Mursion Virtual Roundtable speaker today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Christopher.
And I hope this roundtable today for all of you will be both educational and informative. But ultimately, the reason that I love to do the work that I do around emotional intelligence is that all I care about is how do you make it practical in the end? How do we really take a concept that for some people, people that are maybe less familiar with it, think of it in some instances as a buzzword. But what you'll see today is that there's a lot of layers to what EQ really is. And so again, how do we take this concept of what emotional intelligence is and use it to our advantage as leaders in terms of how we adapt and how we lead in the workplace. So I always like to start with a story, and I have a few of them baked in here of leaders that I've identified as ones that in some instances wrote about in my book, and in otherwise ones that I've kept note of, especially during the pandemic, as leaders that have really shined and have showcased what EQ is all about. I'll preface that by saying that I use an acronym, I call it Connect the Chord. And as you'll see, the chord being communications, opportunities, relationships, and decision-making. And EQ is really what powers all of that. And I think the real life story of the man that you see on the screen, Larry Fink, who has since become one of the most successful people in the world. You may know him as the leader of BlackRock. But earlier on in his career, not too long after graduating from the Anderson School of Business at UCLA, Larry Fink had built a lot of success in his role at First Boston. But at around 1987, there were changes in interest rates. He made some calculated risks that didn't pay off. And just when he thought he was on his ascent to the top of the financial world, he actually ended up getting forced out in his role at First Boston. And I guess to put it bluntly, he was fired. And so what he had to realize in that situation was, well, how do I adapt and how do I change? He had the idea in his head for a long time about wanting to be the leader of his own organization. So he started BlackRock with a business partner and ultimately built it into the most successful asset management firm in the world in terms of dollars managed in the trillions. And so this quote that you see on the screen here really embodies a lot of what his belief system is about. He talks about having a strong sense of purpose and commitment to help company connect more deeply to its customers and adjust to the changing demands of society. And so the big words that you see on the screen around purpose in terms of long-term profitability, I'm not just here to talk about literal financial dollars. When I think of profitability, I think of it in terms of the impact that that has on the culture of an organization. And so much of how he defined success for his career started with a purpose and a vision for the organization that he has. He learned to adapt from a really trying professional experience in his career. And he's talked very often about how much learning is so important, everyday learning, to continuing to stay on top from a subject matter standpoint in the knowledge of the financial markets, in guiding his company, in building relationships throughout the organization. He's always learning about new people at BlackRock. And so in so many ways, this purpose is really what helps to drive the Chord of communications, identifying opportunities, and in his case, investments, building relationships throughout the organization, and his decision-making, which has always been able to stay above water and build such a profitable company. So in so many ways, what he has embodied as an emotionally intelligent leader is someone that, yes, is a very wise business person who's been able to make smart decisions, but he's also been able to build really solid relationships within the organization to earn the trust of others. And as you'll see in some of the subsequent slides, to really focus on the little things that make a business successful. So purpose being a huge driver in terms of having self-awareness that leads to having an emotionally intelligent mindset. And so CORD, Chord, communications, opportunities, relationships, and decisions. The slide that you see on the screen right now, this actually came from a successful article I'd written several years ago that went viral. And it was so much of the way that I began to see what it means to actually just be an emotionally intelligent person, not just a leader. And so really, these are the qualities that through my own research and business experience and entrepreneurial experience, having written, coached, and spoken at a number of different organizations, this is always what kind of came back to me. And several of the components that you'll see here are among the most researched components of what EQ is all about, self-awareness and empathy, right? But I also like to talk about having a passion and having optimism, which falls a lot under the motivation pillar of EQ. Adaptability being another cornerstone piece of what emotional intelligence is about. Understanding and identifying your needs and wants, having a self-belief that informs self-awareness. And also that altruistic mindset. One of my favorite values that I see almost to a T adopted by the very most successful leaders that I've both researched, written about, and worked with. A desire to help others succeed, and of course, the desire to succeed for yourself. But an emotionally intelligent leader is someone that leads with empathy, but has a really driving passion, and I would even say a fire, an enthusiasm to see the people in their organization succeed. So a little bit more, again, of the education for those of you that might be looking for a little bit more of kind of that academic rigor behind what emotional intelligence is. And as you'll see at the top of the screen here, the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, these were what were largely defined by Daniel Goleman's work. And many of you are probably familiar with his eponymous book, Emotional Intelligence, which came out about 25 years ago. And so self-management, social skill, self-awareness, motivation, and empathy being those 5 pillars. And I'll talk about, again, how communications, opportunities, relationships, and decisions really fall under those. And as you see on the screen, the definition, of emotional intelligence. And this was really first defined and hashed out. Many of us know it today. Dr. Peter Salovey, who's the current president of Yale University and has done a lot of powerful work in establishing the program that they have at Yale called Ruler. And I always tell people Dr. John D. Mayer, no, not the famous guitar player and heartthrob John Mayer, but Dr. John D. Mayer, psychologist at the University of New Hampshire. They were the ones that really defined what we know today to be emotional intelligence, and actually really kind of kindled that fire for Daniel Goleman and the work that he did, and in many of the other folks who have followed, and some of the other titans in the field that have popularized emotional intelligence. As I talked about, for me, I think the real value is how do you make it actionable? And so my goal here today is to be able to describe a number of ways that we can make EQ actionable and to demonstrate examples of what that looks like. But the other important thing to really drill home about what emotional intelligence is about is that this is a skill set that all of us can acquire and that all of us can improve. So EQ, think of it as a muscle that you can exercise literally every day and continue to make improvements upon. So every one of us can exercise empathy. And if you think about what that really would look like and mean, picture yourself in the workplace, getting to really identify and put yourself in the shoes to take the position of another individual and really listen to that person with care and with joy in your heart and to understand where they're coming from. Every one of us has the ability to do that. We can all be self-aware. We can understand what drives us, our passion, our values, things like purpose and how we want to define success for ourselves. We can all understand our needs and wants. I talked a little bit before about behaving altruistically. And boy, oh boy, I think all of us could probably sympathize with the final bullet, especially over the last 7+ months. All of us can adapt in difficult times. We can understand and assess the current situation for what it is and do a basic gap analysis and understand what we need to do to adapt and make smarter decisions and move forward and still try to find success as much as we possibly can, given the circumstances around us. Because self-awareness is such a key component of what EQ is all about, I always like to dedicate a little bit of time to talking about exactly what self-awareness is. And it's really for what most people think of, and you're probably nodding your head here, it's understanding yourself, it's recognizing your own emotions and how you can then go about putting together a plan of how you manage them. But a lot of what self-awareness is, and I find this in the coaching work that I do, and this is why I think that EQ is so important, is that it's how we perceive others to see us. It's picking up on things like body language and how our tone, our posture, the message that we're delivering, how we communicate, how that's being perceived by other people, really in an effort to gain clarity, to drive a relationship, to help ourselves and, of course, the people that we're with to be more successful. Just a little bit more there about self-awareness. So here you go, guys, a little bit just in terms of the breakdown of connecting the chord between communications, opportunities, relationships, and decisions. Emotional intelligence between how we understand ourselves, how we manage and comport ourselves, how we plan, go about exercising ways that we can take better care of ourselves through our own self-care. How we motivate and find that passion and desire every day to bring out the best in others as well as ourselves. All of these things in terms of empathy and social skill, the art and the nuance of how we go about communicating, crafting relationships, making smart decisions. All of these things are possible with emotional intelligence. So a big area of my expertise is working with teams. It's working with organizations, and in many instances, it's working with a leader and his or her executive staff and helping them not always to just form a team, but to really catalyze that team and to make them more successful. And in a lot of the work that I've done, I developed what I call hallmarks of having great teams. And so many people, and I'd even ask, and you're welcome to respond here in the chat. I know Jamie will be monitoring that. What would be the first thing that you think of? And it doesn't have to necessarily be exactly through the lens of emotional intelligence, but even if you think about what exactly makes a great team, what are those characteristics or components of what make a great team? Feel free to respond in the chat.
While people are dropping that in the chat, and Steve said most leaders don't have these traits and are not willing to adopt because it may show signs of weakness and inadvertently hurt their employees or cause others to jump ship. So his question to you, what would be a good way to talk EQ upwards to the top? That's always a tricky one.
Yeah, well, I think the voice, and a lot of what we hear in business, right? It's the voice of the customer. It's listening to the voice of the customer. What about the voice of the employee? And I'll actually answer that in some ways with the use of an example or two examples of leaders that I've seen that are absolute experts, one of whom was an expert, one of whom is currently. So Sarah Blakely, one of the most successful businesswomen, one of the most successful business leaders in the world, the CEO of Spanx, literally was able to build that company by soliciting the input, not just of prospective customers, but of the people that she leads. And so she's a very emotionally intelligent leader. One of the people that I actually profile in the first part of my book is that she's always going throughout the organization to understand and get feedback from others. And so I'll kind of answer it in reverse by saying, as a leader, encourage your employees to provide you with feedback. Encourage your employees to speak up and share success stories, share challenges, promote ideas and open discussion. I think as a leader, it's kind of a reciprocal relationship. If we're going to expect that from the people that we lead, we need to empower them and create a culture of openness. And I think to take a page from Dr. Brene Brown, to be vulnerable, to actually have that humility first as a leader, to empower the people that we lead to be able to speak up. And I think that once we create that environment, it really empowers the people that we lead to be open and to be honest and to give very, very transparent ideas, guidance, feedback, and in some instances, maybe even criticisms that are all going to be in an effort to create a competitive and bettering environment.
Absolutely. And I would say that is exactly what you're getting ready to touch upon, which is a huge part of, one of the hallmarks of a great team. The other thing that people have put into the chat is trust, common and agreed sense of purpose, respect for each other, coherence, communication, more trust, each person contributing their best and skills from a greater excellence collectively, empowerment, honesty, collaboration, collectively utilizing individual skills in an effective way, desire to work and meet goals, shared vision and purpose, lots of trust, vulnerability. Internal customers are also necessary for success. Selfless and engaged contribution. Lots of work about practice and trust, common vision, common goals.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And I think that the word vision that Jamie said that I just kept hearing a lot of, vision to me is born from having really keen self-awareness, both as an individual and in terms of an organization being very self-aware. Trust, usually the number one answer, right? And I was curious to see what everyone had to say. And so trust being baked into what I consider to be the number one thing. And I always like to say that it's, for me, it's camaraderie. It's that camaraderie being a mutual trust and friendship among people who spend a lot of time together. So we're in an interesting time, of course, that for many of us, we're no longer co-located. If you weren't previously working remotely, you're now more than likely in that situation. So how do you go about building trust and building that friendship among others? And so we'll talk a little bit in the subsequent slides, but a great example of that is in the feedback that I've received from so many of the organizations that I've worked with. What do employees want most from their leaders? They want someone who is invested in them personally, not just professionally, not just someone who's only there to check in on business results. So camaraderie is built from a leadership standpoint. And think of it in terms of friendship. That friendship helps to establish trust when you take the time to get to know someone, to ask them how they're doing, maybe to ask them how the different challenges are that are going on. And I know for me as someone who's an entrepreneur, a little bit different times to be in an environment where the kids are around and jumping in on Zoom calls, maybe not right now, but in others that I've been on. And so, we're all dealing with competing challenges and priorities. And so camaraderie, when we take the time to really build friendship and to show a personal interest that is very genuine, authentic, and leading with empathy, that's a lot of the way that we go about establishing trust. And that feedback I've typically found across the board, both in my research and with organizations that I've worked with, that employees want to know that the people that lead them, they want to know that they care, not just on a professional development level, but on a personal level as well. Focus and commitment toward the goal, kind of some of that was echoed in terms of shared vision, purpose, but successful teams, successful organizations define success. And so we often see that in a mission statement on the website. So they're very mission oriented, independent in the thought and in the strategy that they bring to the table, but they're able to come together to reach consensus to make smart decisions that are in the best interest of the organization. Talk a lot about the little things. And I think the perfect example of this, I was trying earlier, I was alluding a little bit to the life of one of the great CEOs, I believe, in American history, was Herb Kelleher, both the chairman and original founding member of Southwest Airlines. Herb, he unfortunately just passed away within the last 2 years, but had a really unique style in terms of how he led, and in so many ways became known more for his quirks and kind of the little silly things that he would do that garnered attention in terms of both how Southwest marketed and branded itself, but even ideas that he had early on in the history of Southwest Airlines. He found that a competitor had undercut them on pricing just 5 years into their existence. This company, Braniff Airlines, was offering half the fare for flights within Texas. And so Herb Kelleher decided to not actually lower the price of his round trip flights, but what he did instead was offer a fifth of Chivas Regal Scotch to every single person that decided to fly on a round trip flight on Southwest Airlines. So those little things, even if you're not looking to give out prized whiskey to your customers, he also was really good about getting up. He'd get up at 4:00 in the morning and walk around the airport and say hi to the people at the gates. He'd walk outside in freezing cold weather and hand a hot coffee to the folks working on the tarmac. So those little intangibles that lead to success, it's why he became one of the most highly regarded leaders. And frankly, it's exactly, I think, so much of what has contributed to that culture, which has led to a profitable year every year of the existence of Southwest Airlines. And I don't know if any of you guys would know this, but every year that Southwest Airlines has been an operating organization, they have been profitable. Of course, as we talked about, a little cornerstone piece of emotional intelligence, so adaptability. And I think adaptability is really simple. It's knowing when to stay the course and knowing when to change. And goodness knows we've all had to modify and change our strategic approach. And in many ways, the cultures of organizations have had to adapt to a remote environment over the last several months. And we've seen certain organizations, for example, Amazon, Twitter, some of the bigger tech companies, allowing people to work from home and recognizing that in some of the instances, results have been there across the board. And so as a leader, understanding and recognizing change, and in many ways, I talk about embracing change. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. So how do you embrace it? How do you identify it and have that self-awareness to know when it's occurring? And then to solicit feedback from the people around you to understand how to manage yourself. This is a coaching maxim. A big part of my life is having played college basketball, and I also coached high school basketball for several years after finishing my college career. And there was a maxim that was universally said within that profession that I would often talk about. There are two things that you can always control: your attitude and your effort. And that, to me, so much of that comes back to self-awareness and motivation when we talk about emotional intelligence. It's coming in with a positive attitude. But more even specifically, I like to talk about maintaining a positive outlook, maintaining an optimistic outlook for the long term. And if you look at successful leaders and successful organizations, even on down days, they're able to maintain a positive outlook for the future, both in terms of what their profitability would be and, of course, what they want for their culture. And, of course, all of us can always work hard. Talked a little bit before about one of the most widely respected and successful CEOs in recent history, Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO of PepsiCo. And really, when she came into that organization, they were in disarray. And PepsiCo had really, really fallen off relative to its peers, and in many instances, namely Coca-Cola that we're talking about here. And what she did was inject empathy into that organization and a real personal touch. She did a lot from a business strategy standpoint of introducing new product lines. But in many ways, what she's remembered for, she was revered by the employees at PepsiCo. And it's because of the quote that you can see on the screen. And I love it so much that I'll indulge myself here to read it. You need to be able to look at that person and say, I value you as a person. I know that you have a life beyond PepsiCo, and I'm going to respect you for that entire life and not just treat you as employee number, fill in the blank there, right? 4,567. She was able to connect as a leader, not just with the folks on the senior level, but all across the board at that organization, and showed that she valued them. She led first with empathy. She took the time to listen to the people that she led, and it really made all the difference in terms of business success, but also in dramatically turning around the culture of that organization. Something that I always like to bake in, and this could just be something that you even take into your own day, or maybe in team meetings that you might have for your own organization. We talked quite a bit just now about having a positive outlook and maintaining motivation for the long haul, not just on the day to day. So for reflection, for your own reflection, even after today, is this something that you maintain in the face of present challenges? And so we have another couple minutes before we get into some of the simulation and as well with some of the questions toward the end. But I wanted to be able to share some real practical nuggets and best practices here for you in terms of communication. So I'll highlight a couple of these on the screen and try to give some examples. The second one that you see being the prime example of empathy. And even by definition, what empathy really is taking the position of somebody else. To really what that means is just meeting them where they are, connecting on an emotional level, which is so important in a remote environment right now with everything going on in the world, in terms of just not just the challenges someone might be facing professionally, but personally, in terms of needing to manage, not just their job and their role, but their household in many instances, and functioning, we're in that work from home environment. I'm sure many of you could probably empathize with just what it's like, in many instances to be spending, most of your day inside the house, to be going from your office or to be going from your workstation at home into maybe making dinner for your children or getting them ready for school or picking them up in some instances, or just going about the rest of your day and how you try to take good care of yourself and meet your goals and objectives. One of my very favorite quotes, another piece of empathy here that really builds a relationship from a communication standpoint. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I've really tried to get that across today in terms of that humility, that getting to know people and how much that matters. Setting ground rules for your teams, and I can share some more resources with you around that in terms of different, applications and things that are out there. I'm sure everybody has become very well acquainted, if they weren't prior to March, with Zoom, but there's other tools out there such as Slack. But I also talk about establishing a cadence of communicating in terms of phone, email, instant message, making sure that everybody has a shared understanding of how they're going about communicating. It's going to lead to much, much better results. And last on this slide, I'll share is just providing that clarity, best thing a leader can do. But really, communication starts with listening, doesn't it? It starts with taking the time to listen to the perspective of the other people in our organization. And that's about being personal and making things very human. All right. And so last, just some other best practices here. Some being very obvious in terms of how we go about building relationships that are in connecting the chord. Making sure that when you communicate something, even if it seems really clear to you, get validation for that. Make sure your colleagues understand in exactly the same clarity that you do. And really, that best investment that you're ever going to make is taking that time on a very personal level to form deep connection. It covers the boxes from an emotional intelligence standpoint of the nuance of social skill, of empathy, and really how you go about managing yourself. And last, some kind of do's and don'ts of what works and what doesn't work from a relationship building standpoint in a environment. Again, some of this being a little repetitive, but just personalize. Really, I want you to take away is just to personalize your communication touch points. The second bullet, when I used to do radio work and broadcasting games earlier on in my career, I was doing work on the radio, and my boss always used to say to me, time and score, because people couldn't see the game, so they needed me to remind them. So just the analogy here would be over communicate. Even if you think you're maybe communicating the same message sufficiently, over communicate it and then check in to get that validation that we talked about. Be willing to show your sense of humor and have some cheesy fun. Those things create bonds, and those are kind of those little things that we talked about on those 5 hallmarks of great teams that really, really matter. Last, and I'll slip up. Sorry, guys. I think I'll just move ahead here to the end. I know we're kind of up on time, and I want to be respectful of that for the simulation that Jamie's going to do. So I had sent Jamie a copy of the presentation today. So all of you, if you'd like access to it, you're welcome to it. But again, this is the work that I do in terms of presenting to different organizations, and I do it in some instances full day, half day, or over the course of an hour or two. And I've had a lot of success with really injecting that emotionally intelligent mindset into the culture of an organization. So just a little bit more about me, guys. I really, really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen, and I look forward to taking part further in the conversation here. Thank you.
And let our host avatar, Bennett, come on in, and I can introduce you to him, and he'll talk you through this. So I'm going to go ahead and have Christopher and myself go off camera here, and Susan, we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Christopher.
Hello, my name is Bennett. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can see and hear you okay. How about you, Bennett? Can you see me?
Absolutely. Susan, it's so nice to meet you, and thank you for participating today. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share a slide with you. I'll read it out loud, see if you have any questions, okay?
Okay.
So you're going to be talking to Danny Pierce over, we'll say Zoom. She's one of your employees. She's generally effective. She's smart, dedicated, and passionate about her work, but her performance has started slipping since she started working from home. The desired outcome is understand the situation and get Danny's agreement on a plan moving forward. You can use strategies like, without judgment, invite Danny into a conversation about her recent performance, help Danny discover a sense of control over the situation, offer help or resources to support Danny during this difficult time. Do you have any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. So Susan, what's going to happen next is I will get you to your Zoom call with Danny. She'll be able to see you and hear you in real time. At any time, you can say pause. And at that moment, I'll return to check in if you need assistance, if you would like to go to the reflection or back to the general webinar. And Jamie may also pop in to let us know what she'd like us to do as well. If the call starts to go on for a bit, I also may just come back and check in if it's a good time to pause.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Susan. Have fun.
Thank you, Bennett.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Danny. How are you?
Sorry, I'm getting a call. A text. Let me, okay, put my phone away. I'm okay. Things are fine. How about you?
First of all, thank you for putting your phone away. I appreciate that. And also to thank you for being willing to have this conversation with me.
Yeah, Susan, I know that I've been a bit behind on my work, and I'm worried about my job right now. I'm sorry, I'm just really stressed today.
It's okay, Danny. It's okay. First of all, I just want to tell you, before we start talking about the current situation, I wanted to tell you how valued you are as an active team member, how driven you are, how passionate you are. And I truly appreciate and honor all the work that you've done so far.
Thank you.
Wonderful contributor. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. Today's really hard. I needed to hear that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm glad. I'm glad. We're all going through a tough time right now. Yeah. Even me.
You are?
Yeah, I am. I have elderly parents who I am taking care of from a long distance, and it's very tough. And it's taken a lot of energy and emotion to try to balance that along with work.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be really hard.
Yes, thank you. So what's been happening with you? I'd love to hear about what you're going through as well.
Yeah, Susan, thanks for asking. And thanks for also setting the tone around. I mean, I have been struggling to get my work done. That's been very difficult. I'm usually a high performer, get a lot of things done.
I know.
Yeah. So for me, I'm having a hard time because I'm alone. There's no one here. It's just me. And I'm an extrovert. I really enjoy connecting with people at work, in the kitchen, or being able to work with other people. And I don't know how long this is going to go on. And I'm just really struggling wrapping my brain around that part. Yeah, that's a really big obstacle for me right now, or just I'm struggling with right now.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, I also have been working from home and I'm alone here too. And I try to think of ways to feel less alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that you can think of, Danny, that would make you feel less alone? And we're all not back working in the office, and I know that, and I realize that things are different. And with that, we're all in the same boat, right? We're all working from home, and many of us are alone. What are ways, Danny, that you can think of that will allow you to focus more on work and feeling empowered and feeling like the upbeat, productive person that I know you are?
Mm-hmm. Well, Susan, I mean, maybe part of what I could do is, see if anyone would be open to having an open call, like on Zoom, where we just work together. We don't have to talk. Also, I had a dog earlier this year who sadly passed away in February, and I really miss having an animal around the house. I was thinking maybe I might foster a dog, or maybe it's just time to adopt. Just having a constant companion just really is helpful.
Both of those are great ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just also seeing maybe about, I get some Zoom fatigue sometimes, but maybe just trying to meet with friends over Zoom, or do some really safe social distancing, especially, before the weather gets really cold and we won't be able to be outside together. So those are some things I can try.
Those sound great. Yeah. Do you think you can actually do them, make them happen?
Yeah, Susan, forgive me. I'm going to make a list of these on my phone. I'm not looking for any other reason. I just want to, okay, I'll see about setting up some Zoom calls with workmates to work with me in silence if anyone's open. See about adopting or fostering a dog, and then just more connection outside of work with my friends.
That's great. You also had mentioned perhaps Zoom fatigue. Did I not?
Mhm.
Did you
Yeah,
talk
a little bit.
And
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I thought you were asking a question. Go, Susan.
Yeah. Are you experiencing Zoom fatigue at all with work?
Not work, but because I'm on it so much for work, when I get off work, I just want to step away from my home office and keep walking. I don't want to get on Zoom then to engage for something else. So
Okay, I understand. So then maybe your solution about seeing friends at a social distance is wonderful. Also, even I find everybody gets so many emails these days.
Yeah.
What happens if you were just to pick up the phone to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how wonderful do you feel if someone picks up the phone and says, "Hey, Danny, I was thinking about you today. And I'm sitting here all alone doing my work, and I just wanted to say hi."
That sounds great. I haven't been much of a phone talker, but I think that's a great idea. I'm going to do that after work today and reach out.
Wonderful. Great. Are there other things that you're thinking of that you can do that will allow you to remember who you are, even in these strange circumstances?
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly some outdoor activities that I've really enjoyed. I haven't been doing. I think nature is really a great thing for me. Just in, going for a walk or a hike. I need to do more of that. I think I got into the mindset of I need to stay in the house, and I miss taking my dog for walks in the park, and we have a park where people are being really great about social distancing. So I just see where I have things that I can do that are going to help me and give me hope. And Susan, I also want to acknowledge the time, but I've got another meeting to get to. But this was so helpful for me. I really appreciate how much you helped me today. I wasn't expecting to have this conversation with you, and I appreciate your care and appreciation as well.
Well, thank you for honoring me and being so honest and telling me, Danny, how you're feeling and what you were going through. And I am here to help. If you would like to reach out to me at any time.
Okay.
Okay.
I will. I didn't reach out this time, Susan. I will. I won't let that happen again. I will reach out when I'm just really feeling like I need support and check in.
Okay, wonderful. And meanwhile, I will be following up with you as well.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Nice job, Susan. Shall we go through a brief reflection process?
Please,
Just a couple of
Bennett.
questions. Wonderful,
Yeah.
Susan. So how are you feeling emotionally after having that conversation with Danny?
Feeling very touched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We often ask what's something you did that you thought went well. If you want, you could expand a bit. You did a lot of great in that conversation with Danny. You really helped her. So is there anything you'd like to reflect on, something you did that you thought went well?
I like to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to tell people what to do, how to function. I don't think that's helpful. And I like to meet people where they are and understand where they are and what they are going through and facing, so I can try to understand what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yes. And my observations of some things that you did well is, for one thing, Danny was very upset when the call started. She was not, if you'll let me use this terminology, really in the room with you. She was not present with you, but you were able to acknowledge her emotion, display empathy, let her know what a great job she was doing and what you were wanting to do in that conversation. So you were able to get her to be with you, to let you know more of what's going on. And you left so much space for her to respond. And you didn't try to lecture or prescribe to her. You asked her what are some things, and that you got her into a different frame and mindset by the end of that call. She had active action items that she was going to do that were going to make her feel better. And I would say, looking at her at the end, from the beginning of that call to the end, she already felt better. It's already working. So what a wonderful thing to be able to help her reach for herself during that conversation.
Thank you so much, Bennett.
Great. And sometimes we ask what's something that you might do differently, but I also want to acknowledge time. And Jamie, is that a question you would like me to ask, or do you want to put it out for general reflections of the group? What would you like to do now?
Just gonna ask you one more question, just in terms of beyond just the conversation itself. How did that feel to have that conversation with an avatar, to be in that conversation simulator? If you could just share that with us.
I'm so glad you asked that, Jamie, because I actually was going to volunteer that. Was really nice. It was very comfortable. It felt almost real. It truly did. Acknowledging different personalities of Bennett and Danny, and seeing her expression change and see her taking notes, it felt what a real life person might be doing. Yeah, response was great.
Yeah, I mean, I was, what jumped out right off the bat was the avatar, kind of literally and figuratively set the tone emotionally for the conversation. You could see that she was sorrowful, and I just, I thought, I know others kind of commented on this already, so but Susan did an awesome job of, just again meeting her where she was. I thought, from a coaching standpoint, meeting her on that emotional level, because if she's coming in with prescriptions, as you guys talked about, or criticism, or just kind of overlooking that emotion, that's not going to work, and it could end up really backfiring or hurting that individual. And so Susan executed that perfectly, I think, in terms of just how she handled that, in terms of the emotional connection, and just throughout, as she kind of said too, just providing a lot of space and opportunity from a coaching standpoint. It was, at least in my experience, as textbook as it gets, and a great job.
Wonderful job. Thank you so much, Susan, for being brave and jumping in, and Christopher, for sharing your insights with us. Oh, I had one question that did come out to you, Christopher, that from Jake, that said, do you recommend, when it comes to Chord, do you recommend doing that in progression?
The short answer is no. In many instances, as everybody probably would recognize, both in terms of listening and how we, verbally communicate or express our body language to others, communication oftentimes comes first. But no, not specifically a progression. More meant to be, just a memorization technique, in terms of something that, when you're thinking about, well, what is the impact and what is the real value of how to make emotional intelligence actionable, in terms of just how we interact with other folks, just how we comport ourselves and build ourselves in terms of business, just really keeping in mind those four things: communications, opportunities, relationships, and decision-making. And honestly, you can rearrange it any which way you like, but the Chord for me is, the spirit of driving that connection, of actually making an impact and having connection first. And I think from an EQ standpoint, when you start from that position of self-awareness and empathy, it really leads to some really powerful impact.
So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.